Hello everybody, I myself Sheethal Aji Mani. Today we are going to discuss about the different types of attributes in ER model. So we all know that ER model we will be having entities and the characteristics of these entities we are represented using attributes. So we can call them as attributes. So if we tell an example, if you consider an entity student will be having different attributes. Student register number will be an attribute. Student name will be an attribute. Then course for which the student is studying will be an attribute. So what are the different types of attributes in this ER model? Okay, what are the different categories or classification? That is what we are going to discuss today. So the different types of attributes in ER model we can name as simple attribute, composite attribute, single valued attribute, multi-valued attribute, then stored attribute, derived attribute, null valued attribute, and complex attribute. So let us start with the simple attribute. So what do we mean by simple attribute? Simple attribute. So simple attribute is also known as atomic attribute. So the attributes that cannot be further divided, subdivided, that they are known as simple attributes, right? Or atomic attributes. For example, if you consider student, then register number is a simple attribute, or a department number is a simple attribute. Considering a course ID is a simple attribute, we cannot further divide it. Okay, so they are atomic attributes. So which we can say that simple attribute is an attribute which cannot be further subdivided or further divided. So now coming to the next kind of attribute, that is nothing but composite attribute. Then what do we mean by composite attribute? Composite attribute can be subdivided or can be divided into smaller subparts. So composite attributes are used only if there is a need to refer to the attributes as a whole as well as a part by part. Example, if we tell address, you consider address of a student or address of a person, address of a customer. Address attribute can be further divided into divisions. For example, house number will be a part of address attribute. Street name will be part of address attribute. Area, city, country, all will be part of address attribute. So address attribute can be subdivided into many divisions. So they are known as composite attribute. Another example of composite attribute, if we tell the name attribute. So because name attribute will be consisting of first name, middle name, and last name. So then we are having the single valued attribute. So now what do we mean by single valued attribute? An attribute that can take only a single value at a time. That is known as single valued attribute. So usually for a particular entity, each attribute will have a single value. For example, if we tell age attribute is a single valued attribute, only one value can be taken for a particular person at a time, right? For age. And another example is DOB, date of birth, right? Only one date of birth will be there for one person, right? Multiple values cannot be there. So these kind of attributes are known as single valued attribute. Now, next one is multi-valued attribute. So anyway, single valued attribute we already discussed. So we will be knowing what multi-valued attribute is. So some of the attributes can have multiple values, more than one values for the same attribute. So these attributes are called what? Multi-valued attributes. So example, if we tell a college degree, a person can have multiple degrees, right? A college degree attribute can have multiple values. A person may be possessing one or more degrees, right? For example, in the case of a degree attribute, we can say the person is having BE degree, BCA, ME, MCA, right? That can be there, right? So degree is a multi-valued attribute. Another example is department location. A company can have multiple locations for its department, right? So Bangalore, Mumbai, multiple locations can be there for the department. So these are the multi-valued attribute. Now let us talk about the stored attributes. Now what do we mean by stored attribute? So the value of certain attributes that cannot be obtained or derived from some other attributes. Right? The attributes values that cannot be obtained from other attributes. They are known as stored attribute. So no two or more attributes may sometimes be related. For example, consider age and date of birth. So age we can consider as a date of birth we can consider as a stored attribute, right? Date of birth is there. We can actually derive our age from date of birth. So date of birth will be considered as a stored attribute, and age will be considered as a derived attribute. So that is what we are going to talk in our next attribute, that is derived attribute. So if the value of an attribute can be derived from some other attribute, they are known as what? Derived attribute. Now example, age is a derived attribute. If date of birth is known, then we can derive age from the DOB. So age is a derived attribute. Another example, gross pay of an employee, we can derive it from the basic salary and the deductions of the employee salary, right? So that also can be considered as a derived attribute. Now next attribute is null value. So sometimes for an entity a particular attribute may not have applicable value. Some entities will not be it is not necessary they can have that value. For such attribute, null value can be assigned. So at what all conditions, situations we can assign the null value? A particular attribute is not applicable at all for the entity. For example, in the case of undergraduate students, the attribute degree is not applicable at all. So in that case, a null value can be assigned to that particular attribute. Now the value of the attribute is not known. That is another situation. If it is not known, then the age of the particular student is not known, then null value can be assigned to it. Now another example, phone number attribute. It can contain null value if the employee doesn't have a phone number. So these are null value. Then finally we are having the complex attribute. So what do I mean by complex attribute? Complex attribute is a type of attribute formed by nesting the composite attributes and the multivalued attributes. For example, a person can have many phone numbers, many email addresses, home addresses will be there, more home addresses will be there. So if we consider an attribute called contact details, everything will come under this, right? So these kind of attributes are known as complex attributes. So these are the 8 different types of attributes in the ER model. Thank you.